All right, hi. We're going to look at angles, and we're going to be doing a lot with angles in the next few lessons and kind of moving forward from here. So it's a good idea for us to understand the kind of notation we're going to use, and for some of you, this is going to be a review. So the goal is just for you to be able to understand just the written and the oral language we'll be using for all of this. So if you look at this first picture I have here, right? I've got two drawings here. I've got, if we look at the one on the left, when we say what is an angle, well, most of you would be able to recognize that this spot right between here, between those two rays, is an angle. And so when we think of an angle, some of the language we need to think about is if you've got something that looks like this picture over here, right? You've got this part right here, right, where they meet, okay? And for any shape or anything, when you have something that looks sort of like a corner, that's called a vertex, all right? A vertex. If you have more than one, they're called vertices. But for this one, we just have one, so we would just use vertex. All right, the angle is usually, not always, but it's usually the smaller space between the two, and I'm going to use some new language here, between the two rays. All right, this is a ray. All right, a ray is like it's kind of like a cross between a line and a segment, where it has an end point, it has one end point, and then it goes indefinitely on in the other direction. So you've got this angle is made up of two rays, and the angle is the measure between those two rays. All right, so that's kind of how that looks on this example over here. If we go over to this other picture right over here, okay, we've got a lot of different things going on here. You could say, look at it and say, well, there's an angle here, there's an angle here, there's another angle here. We'll be doing something in a little while to show us that these two angles are equal to each other, but that's another lesson. And then we've got an angle here, right? So you got four different angles, and you kind of see how I'm marking them, right? I'm going to erase that and walk you through that. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Okay, I didn't mean to get rid of all that stuff. So when you're marking an angle, what you want to do is, if you're looking for a specific angle, you would mark it like that, with a little arc going from there. So that's kind of one way of showing an angle. Now, it's kind of important moving forward that we also understand other ways to mark the angles. And then really quick before we get off this page, you would call this your point of intersection, because you've got two lines. This is your point of intersection. If you were talking about a specific angle, like this angle here, you would then refer to that as the vertex of this angle right here. Okay, so let's look at labeling these things, how to identify it. So I've got some drawings here. Basically, what you do is whenever you're trying to label an angle and they're giving you letters that are like points on the lines or the rays or the vertex or whatever, you're going to use the letter that stands for the vertex is always going to be your middle letter, and you're going to use three letters to identify it. So, for example, if I want to identify this angle, I would go angle, and you always use that bent L. Right, I'd go angle, and then I know C is going to be my middle letter, so I can go BCA or ACB. So it doesn't really matter. They're the two ways of saying the same thing. Okay, these are congruent. These are the same angle. They're equal to each other. Not a problem. Similarly, let's take a look at this one right here. We've got this one. We would call that angle ACD or angle DCA. So that's kind of the general idea of how you do things. This is an example over here of something you have when maybe they don't have like points or anything marked on it, but you can clearly see that E is the letter that's sort of denoting like some point out on this line right here. K, same thing, some point out on this line. And then G is referring to this vertex right here, that corner. And so this angle, if we did this angle right here, could be angle EGK or angle KGE, depending on how you want to write it. And then this last set of examples right here is kind of different because it's we're not using this convention that we're using up here. You know, we're not, or over here. We're not using any of that. We're going to use a slightly different convention. It's a lot easier. And pretty much when you have something like that, and when they number the angles, all you have to do is just say, oh, all right, well, so that angle would be angle 4. This angle right here would be angle 2, and so on. So that's an easy way to do that. A lot of times resources and, you know, books and everything will do that just to make it easier. But you have to be able to read it like this as well, because that's how you're going to see it in, you know, most of your geometry classes and everything like that. And they do that to make sure that so they can be very specific about labeling which angle they want. All right, so let's talk real quick about something called the measure of an angle. So I have M is my vertex here, right? It's not this angle, it's this vertex. And then I've got A, L, T, P, which kind of represent that. So this would be angle AMT. This would be angle LMT. This would be angle TMP. And then this would be angle PMA or AMP. It doesn't matter. So you can go any way you want with these. I sort of went going around clockwise, you know, boom, 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 or boom, 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 right? So that's kind of how I did it. But you could do it the other way too, and it would be just as correct. So when we talk about the measure of an angle, that means that if you took a protractor and you measured the angle for a number to see how many degrees it is, the measure of an angle, there's a specific way to write that. So if I'm saying, if they want to say, you know, find the measure of angle PMA, they're not going to write that. They're going to go find. So the way they will write that is they'll say find, and then they'll use a lowercase m, L, PMA. And then that represents finding the measure of that angle. So whenever you see a little m followed by the angle, that's measure of the angle. So you'll see some of that from time to time, quite a bit, and you need to know what it means. So that was the purpose of this, just to kind of reacquaint you with some of this notation so that we're all good and ready to rock on it. So thanks for paying attention, and we'll see you in the next video.